everyone, I'm Mims, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for being here. I'm here with a cup of coffee, and I thought that I would pull out a section of my collection. Ha 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 ha. Poet and didn't know it. Okay, bad rhymes. I have been doing these over the last few months. Not so much of an exhaustive collection, but more of just categories within my collection. And so sometimes there ends up being decks that pop up in more than one video. But today I thought that I would talk about mini decks. Now, some of this has just been fun because I realize in this case it's a little more obvious. You know, it's pulling out the small decks, whether they're in a tin or otherwise. But I also thought it's also for myself thinking about, like, why do you have so many and what are some of the reasons why I have them? So for me, saying this at the beginning, this is not probably so much, some of these are going to be kind of obvious things, but why have a mini deck? Few reasons. They can be very helpful when you're looking for something to travel with. They often, not always, but especially when we're talking like the mass market ones, it can be a way to try out a deck that you've heard a lot of people talk about, or you know, maybe it's popular often if it gets to the pocket size or a tin version, then it was already popular in the regular size. And so sometimes that smaller size can be great if you want to try out a deck, regardless of how you found out about it, whether you've heard about it a lot on YouTube or, you know, you just think, oh, I would like to try that one out. What's another reason? It can also be great in terms of travel, or having something that you throw in your bag. Maybe you're not like a regular reader on the go, but you occasionally read for friends or family members. And so if you just kind of always have a small deck with you, it's kind of cool to have that. What are some other reasons? Oh, I also like them because if I want to do like a bigger spread, it can be nice to work with a smaller deck. Or if I want to do a bigger spread in the sense of like adding in layers, like adding in you know, like adding in Oracle, or even adding in more than that. I usually, if I do a reading, I usually only have 2 decks going, but every once in a while, I like to mix it up. What would be another reason? Sometimes it's the only size that the deck is available, which is the case in a couple of these. And then I would say, I think my other reason for having a smaller option is they can be good for study, particularly if you want to pull out a deck for comparison, or if you're doing some kind of a 2-deck study, for instance. That can be sort of helpful. So let's do these. Let me get them kind of organized. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see. I had these kind of organized and then I mixed them up. Those are all tarot. Those are all tarot. Okay. So I have 4 tarot decks, I have 4 Oracle decks, and then I have 2 different systems decks, and then the rest are tarot. Just for simplicity, let me say it now so I don't forget, I will list all of the decks in the order that I've shown them. If there are any independent decks, there's at least one. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's at least one independent deck, or at least 2. I will also include the link to those websites. They're not affiliate links, but that way you can find them directly. And then if I have a flip through of any of these, and I think right now there's only 1 of those, but if I have a flip through of any of the decks, I will also include it. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start with the Oracle. I was able to get, there was a sale when I bought both of these, and I was able to get both decks for less than the price of just one of these at the regular size. And I was glad to do it. So we'll talk about them kind of both together, but I'll show them separately. So we'll do Pocket Archetypes by Krans, the Wild Unknown Pocket Archetypes. And it has a deck and guidebook. And then this one is the Pocket Animal Spirit deck and guidebook. Wild Unknown Pocket Animal Spirit. And that one's kind of glittery. So these are both tin versions. These are the mass market. I don't know if there were indie versions of these or not. I have heard people talk about both of these decks in the smaller version, mentioning that they're almost too small or that the deck is too small. I luckily, okay, I'm wearing glasses, but they're really just for fun. I actually have pretty good eyesight, so at least for now, unless I'm jinxing myself, I am still able to read this. So I get the frustration. You have this lovely book, but it's squished, you know, it's mini. But it definitely packs everything that's in the original guidebook is in here. But I've also heard people talk about that this deck in the regular size is kind of big and awkward. So, like I said, these are the backs. And I don't know if this is helpful, but I did bring my Rider-Waite Smith just so you could have an idea. So, and I don't have this in the full size, so I don't know how big it is. But just kind of for some comparison, it's about as wide as a typical tarot size card, but it's probably almost not quite half the size. So anyway, I was glad to get both of these, one at the lower price point, and then two, I just remember thinking like they were definitely stuff that I was interested in learning about. I was definitely interested in learning more about archetypes. I mean, I know some archetypes. I think if you know tarot at all, you know, that's definitely part of what tarot is all about. But specifically getting the deck and then getting the smaller size, the entry point was nice in terms of price, and then being able to experiment with both of these decks. I also have found that this is a great one to throw in with pretty much any kind of tarot reading for myself or when I occasionally read for others. And so because of its size, it's kind of nice that no matter what size cards I've got, and then because of its kind of the black and white with just little spots of color, it feels like it's kind of just a good all-arounder. Ha ha ha, it's round, but just it's a good all-around deck anyway. And then getting it at this size was nice for me for the price point to test it out. I'm tempted to getting the full-size version, but I don't necessarily know that I care to have two decks of the same. So I don't know if I would sell it or not. I'm not sure yet, but for now, I'm definitely glad to have this one. And that is the Wild Unknown Pocket Types Oracle by Krans. So now we'll talk about the Wild Unknown Pocket Animal Spirit. One, I really like these tins. They're nice for keeping your cards all together, and the tins don't seem to, you know, fall apart. So they're great for carrying them around. And then this one also, good little guidebook. You get the full thing. It's just the binding on this one is a little harder to open, but it's all there. So you get an illustration along with the card, or, you know, with the page of meaning. And I kind of like this for the same sorts of reasons. I like that it's small, it's easy to throw it in. It's also, again, because those black and white with splashes of color. I love to have this on the go, and I sometimes will just pull one out and then kind of think of that like for my energy for the day, traveling or not. And I work from home, so I don't have like a commute, like I'm not riding the bus or a subway or something every day. But that I think would also be, if I did have a commute, I definitely would pack a smaller deck for my bag, for sure. But because I'm, you know, my commute is, you know, across the room, basically. So anyway, I really like these two. And again, I'm thinking of getting the full size one of this as well. I just don't know that I need both. And so right now I'm fully happy with the tinned version, but I am interested in a possibility of the larger size. Okay, this next one is the Psychic Tarot Pocket Oracle deck by John Holland. It's a 65 card deck with Guidebook. So this is published by Hay House, and this actually came in, you could buy it separately, but it also came in their one of the deck clubs boxes. Hay House does it for, I think it's Canada and the US. I don't think it's offered in any other country, but they offer these deck club boxes where there's 3 decks, and usually there's 2 full-size decks, and then there's usually either some kind of a pocket deck or a deck that doesn't have as many cards. And one of the things that I like about their subscription is that you can opt in and out. Like, so you don't, once you subscribe, I just do it once and then like I cancel it and then wait for the next one and see if I want to do it. And so sometimes I will and sometimes I won't. I think I've gotten 2 or 3 of their boxes. But anyway, this happened to be, I had been curious about this deck, but not enough to like even watch like a flip through or learn much about it. And I still haven't used it very much. But I remember when it came in the deck club, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, I am, you know, it was definitely a deck that I was intrigued by. And I remember thinking, I'll play with it, and if I don't like it, I'll sell it. Oops, and I just threw a card that I'll have to go get later. So again, I still haven't used this very much. But again, it was an interesting option because it came in the deck club. So in that case, it was also kind of a cheaper option because you end up getting 3 decks for around $40. So they're definitely priced under probably maybe what you could get when they're on sale at Hay House. But anyway, that was another one that I was glad to get at a cheaper price and this smaller size. But I haven't used it much to be able to remark on it yet. Okay. That's all. Oh, I have one more oracle. This is a homemade one. Let's see, the summer of 24, I wanted to make a homemade, like a small tarot to go. And I I didn't bring that. That's so funny because I talked about it and then I still didn't think about pulling that out. Anyway, I made a small Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I was able to find printables online from one of my favorite tarot channels, which is the Tarot Shop UK. She has free printables of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. They're just for personal use. It's not so that you can do any kind of commercial. But I got those and then I printed them out in color and then laminated them to make my own little Rider-Waite-Smith deck to go. And while I was on her website, I'm not able to shop from her because she just sells in the UK. But she has a great little website. She's got some tutorial things and some freebie printables. And when I was on her website getting the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I found this. And it was just too cute. They're kind of shiny, but there's all these just little colors. And they almost look like little crystals. And so there's 22 of them and they just have one word. So like strength and willpower and so when I was getting the Rider-Waite-Smith deck printables, I got this one as well. And it came, well, I mean, I printed it out, but it's just a 1-page little thing of meanings. And yeah, you know, it's like destiny, change is coming, have faith. And so it was, since I was making the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, I made this one as well. And it was kind of fun just to have this tiny little oracle. These are tiny, tiny, tiny. But again, that was free from the Tarot Shop UK. And I will include the link if you wanted to print those out yourself as well. Or if you wanted to find those printable Rider-Waite-Smith decks as printables too. Okay, so that is my homemade, so those are the 4 oracle decks. Okay, let's go to other systems and then we'll end with tarot. So when I say other systems, of course, Oracle, right? There's a bunch of different systems within Oracle, right? Every deck is its own system. But I also like having other divinatory systems or other card systems for portability sometimes, or even just for something different. And so you could argue that this is not really a mini. This right now is the only Oracle or Lenormand deck that I have, and it's the Bluebird Lenormand. First came out in 1970, and then renewed in 2016 or 17 from US Games. Oh, some of these are upside down. And so, just in case someone doesn't know about Lenormand, Lenormand is based on, as you can see, not all Lenormand decks do this, but many of them do. They'll put the inset of the playing cards that it's related to. And so it's a 36 card system. And then you read Lenormand more like a sentence. And so the cards next to each other can mean different things. So for instance, like these 2 cards this way mean something, then this means something different, because they modify each other. Like think of sentences. And so, and they can indicate things like positive or negative, or making something faster or slower. There's a bunch of different things about them. Anyway, I started learning about Lenormand when I bought this deck, and I do enjoy having it as something that's both smaller and just something a little different. So that is the Bluebird Lenormand. And again, because it's also 36 cards, so it's a smaller deck anyway, and then fewer cards, so it's definitely easier to throw this in a bag on the go. I wouldn't recommend one of these bags for on the go. I just recently broke the box, and I had an extra one of these little organza bags, so I just threw it in that so I know what it is. So that is the little Bluebird Lenormand. And then another system that's related to Lenormand but not is, and I don't want to say it, so I'm just going to say the Witch fortune telling cards. I have the bicycle version, but it looks like the US Games looks exactly the same. Just a slight difference, I think, in what the cards look like. I think the US Game ones have more like an inset, kind of the way those Bluebird cards do. Anyway, so this is, I think, somewhat based on Lenormand, but a little bit different. And I started reading with this because I was curious, and it was kind of fun to learn a system, and it didn't feel like it took a lot to learn it. You could definitely, I think, read it like you read Lenormand. There was some really basic instructions that did not come with the deck. You had to scan to get them. But there's basically 2 spreads that this kind of shows. And these cards have been around since 1903, even maybe longer. And I think they've been in constant publication, and pardon the train noise. So you can do this spread here, or there's the larger spread, which is the whole deck. So I got them just out of curiosity, like I think I was saying earlier. And then I also like it because it is also a deck of playing cards. So this is a full 52 card deck with 2 jokers. So you can, if you don't want to use them as, you know, fortune telling cards, you can use them as a, you know, just a set of playing cards. So I kind of like it for that. And also just sort of the novelty of learning the different system. I'll put it that way. I've hardly ever, I read for a friend with him one time. We were just kind of looking at my collection. And so I pulled them out and we did a little reading, but I mostly have just used this for myself. So that is the Witch fortune telling cards. Okay, those are my two outside of tarot or oracle. We'll get into tarot now. And I'll start with the homemade ones, or somewhat homemade. So this is, I think it's called Magical Tarot, and it was a scratch off deck that came in a book, and I got it for the novelty and then realized that I didn't like doing it. So scratch off, like you might have, like scratch off like lottery tickets, where there's that metal shaving. It was really hard to do. I thought it was going to be simple, but it took a lot more work. And then at the end, the cardboard was thin enough that I wanted to do something to them. So I ended up backing them with, it already had a glossy front. So I backed them with contact paper. And while it's really cute, I don't mind a pip deck at all. And it's, cute colors. Those are cute backs. But I didn't do a very good job with the corner rounder, as you can see. And then I had a really hard time with an X-Acto knife pulling off the extra lamination. I had a hard time doing that. So, but even if you were good with your corner rounder and good with your, lamination skills, I still don't recommend the deck because it was the scratch off part that was the biggest pain. And then towards the end, I just, it was almost just like, it was just a test of endurance. Like, I just wanted to finish it. It is a cute deck, and I definitely was like, well, if I made it, I'm going to keep it. But I don't think it was worth the time or the hassle. But that is the Magical Tarot, and if anyone is curious, I will also include the link to the video where I talked about DIY decks and whether or not I think that they are useful or helpful or even worth it. But I guess you kind of already know what I think. So that is Magical Tarot. And then another homemade deck. This was, I found a color deck, and then that scratch off deck, and then there was another deck that I found from an independent seller on Amazon, and it was basically, and I had never bought paper this way. I've often bought like a pack of like loose paper, for scrapbooking and collage and even just for arts and crafts. Anyway, there was this deck that was it was two decks in one booklet, and you basically pulled the deck apart or the book apart, and then you had two decks. All you had to do was cut them out and then laminate them. And so it came with two, they're exactly the same. So these are the regular size, but it came with this little mini version. And if I'd been paying attention, but I'd already laminated the sheets that these were on. Otherwise, I don't think I would have kept them. Like, I could have kept these for like journaling or something, but I'd already done the lamination. So I have this little tiny tarot deck that's exactly the same as the larger version. And I laminated them, and they're kind of, it's a novelty thing, but it was fun to play with, and definitely a lot better than doing the scratch off. But I think I'm kind of done buying those DIY decks that come in a book. It's more about me just not being, I'm just not a crafty person. I don't mind making things, but I don't want to assemble or color or do that kind of a thing. So anyway, that is this little mini, and I think it was called something like paper collage whatever. I'll make sure to include the name of it in case it is something that you're interested in. So that is that one. I don't know where the lid to that box went. Oh, it's right there. Okay, the rest of these now are, so those are the DIYs. This next one is one of my favorite decks of all, large or small. This is the Lifeline Tarot. This comes in bridge size, and I think at one point there was a larger size that had color with it, but that's out of print. Anyway, there's, as at least when I'm recording this, there are 2 versions of this deck. And if you aren't familiar with it, it's put out by Hermit's Mirror. It's an independent deck. But what they've done is it's just one whole line to make these illustrations. So it's somewhat, I mean, it's obviously based on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but you get this sort of expansiveness because you've just got this one line. And like in the majors, it's a little more, you can really see, but then in some of the minors, let's see, like here you have the Ace of Swords, or like in this case, you have the 10 of Pentacles. I like that they look kind of like playing cards from far away, and I love this black and white look. I bought the plastic version, and they shuffle nicely, and I thought it was kind of nice to have a waterproof deck for on the go. So that is the Lifeline Tarot, but it also comes in a regular paper stock, and like I said, I'll make sure that all those links are included. Okay, next is Barbara Walker Tarot. As far as I know, this now only comes in the tin size version from US Games. This was a deck that's been around since the 80s. I think 86 is when it was first published, and it's been in print, but now I think at least since 2017 it just comes in this tin version. And just for comparison, it's just a little bit shorter and just a tiny bit narrower. I really like the size of this deck. I had been interested in this for a while. You know, it's kind of one of those, I think it's one of those classic decks, and it can be a bit confronting, a bit dark, and I don't know, I really like it. And I was excited to get this for the collection, and it was kind of cool to have that at least it was still in print in this form, but I think I like the pocket version anyway. So that's the Barbara Walker Tarot, and it's a great one to just pull out. I definitely think of this kind of as I do feel like it's a bit darker in some ways, and maybe even a bit confronting, but either way, I was glad to add this in, and just even for kind of some comparisons. It's just a tiny bit bigger. I think the different tin versions vary by publisher. I know that's an Oracle, but still. But they're still, you know, I like the tinned. They're great for throwing in your bag, and they all seem to hold their, you know, they stay closed. Okay. Next were a couple of decks that came with this book, the Introduction to Tarot. This is by Susan Leavitt, and I bought this. I don't think I really needed an intro book, but I'd been curious about this book for a while, particularly because it talks about both the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Toth together, and it even does those kind of side-by-side comparisons. And I just thought that that was really neat. You can I think you can still buy the book separately, but I bought the kit, and I'm just showing you for comparison, just so that you know why I happen to have these 2 versions. So it came in this big magnetic box, and it came with this book, and then it came with these 2 pocket, I guess you would call them like a pocket version of the Crowley, or I would call it the Harris Crowley Tarot. Thoth Tarot, and then the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. And also these are published by US Games. And so in comparison to the Barbara Walker, these are even a little bit smaller. I don't know if this is the size of other mini decks that they have that are not in a tin. I'm not sure. But again, I don't know if I showed this part, but it came with this little box, and then the two little decks could fit in there. So I really liked that you could get, I already had, of course, well, not necessarily of course, but I had a Rider-Waite-Smith deck and I had a Thoth deck, but I enjoyed getting a smaller one for study and comparison, and particularly for going through this book and being able to have two smaller decks for comparison. And like I said, I don't necessarily think that just because it's a beginner level book that you, which I know we're here just talking about, I'll do a separate video about it, but I bought it with the idea because I thought it might not hurt to go back to some basics and just to see what somebody else said, and then particularly for being able to study the Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith together. So I do enjoy having two smaller versions for that purpose. It definitely makes it easier, you know, if you've got your book out on the table and you've got two decks, you could see where it could get cumbersome. But this felt like a really good kit. And then I'm sure everyone has seen the Rider-Waite, but still, this has the plaid back. And again, I think I did this, but oh, I guess you should see it this way so you can kind of see. Yeah. So I thought that was a good little bargain, and I definitely enjoyed getting these two smaller decks to have in my library, both for study with each other and also just to have a smaller one to go. My little laminated one that I made, while it did okay, and it's definitely one that I don't have to worry about, but the lamination definitely is coming up, and I didn't even bring that one to show, but it's kind of starting to peel away, so it was nice to be able to find a regular produced and a slightly larger size of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And let's compare. I don't know why I didn't do that earlier, but yeah, these are roughly the same size as this, as that Lifeline Tarot. So it's bridge size. So bridge size is, for anyone, if you're ever like looking at playing cards, they're slightly smaller than regular playing cards. Okay. Then we have this one was called the Everyday Tarot, and it came in a little box that didn't feel very helpful for carrying them, so I just grabbed a little bag. But it's called the Everyday Tarot. This is by Bridget Esselman, and this is published by Running Press. This is what you could call, I guess, like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone. The images are going to look similar. Bridget Esselman you might know as Biddy Tarot. Some of you may have, you know, taken a workshop or something from her, or follow her YouTube or social media. And I really like this deck as kind of just a good all-arounder. And it comes with, again, it's probably, well, let's just see. Yeah, it's kind of bridge size as well. And for the longest time, this was the only small deck that I had. I got it fairly cheaply. I think it was like $10 or $15. This is kind of one of those, and I think it's still around. I think it was published in like 2012 maybe, or 2015. but it's one of those that she's gotten a pretty good distribution on. At least in the US, I've seen it, you know, like at Target and, you know, maybe even like Urban Outfitters. Oh, 2018. So it's been out for a while, but I think it's a good solid deck. And the guidebook is also really good for being so small. It has, you get a full page for each card with upright and reversed meanings. And then it even gives you these 2 extra cards. One is a quick tarot spread, and then the other is how to do an accurate reading in 7 steps. So those were those 2 extra cards. But that's the Everyday Tarot by Bridget Esselman and published by illustrated by Eleanor Grosh. Okay. This was a surprise. It was on sale really cheap, and I hadn't known about it. It's the Trinity Tarot. This is published by it's by Ari Weisner. There was an independent version of this deck, and this is published by US Games. I think they also have a deck out, or 2 decks, maybe a couple different decks with Hay House. Anyway, this is a really cute little deck. It was on sale, and I got it because I watched a flip through, and I thought, oh, I like it. So you have these really muted colors, and it's square. So in comparison, it's a bit wider, but it's a little bit shorter than, you know, these decks. And so you have all of the symbolism, but basically all of the people have been removed, and then some of the cards have been renamed. Yeah, you've got the court cards have been renamed to be more gender neutral. And I find that I really like using this deck, and it comes in a sturdy box. It's not a tin, but it's still a really good sturdy box, and it's a great, I use this a lot for reading for people, for others. Reading for people. I read for myself, but I mean, like, when I want to read for others. And this, I have also enjoyed using this with the Pocket Archetypes and the Animal Spirit. Because it's small, and this and one of those decks are small, I have enjoyed using them together. And I feel like the artwork doesn't compete too much. But this is kind of one of those gems that came out, like, it's a favorite, but it came out because it was on sale, and then I realized, like, oh, I really like this. So I've actually given this to a couple of people because I really enjoy this deck. And then it has a very simple guidebook. It's just like a little fold-out paper. But I think it's great for learning, and it's also great for understanding pips, but still wanting to be, if you want to still kind of stay somewhat similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith or stay based in that, I think you can with this deck. And I really like it because it is so open, and with fewer people symbols in it, I think it just makes itself easier for people to see themselves within the deck, because you're not so caught up in, you know, like the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Toth. Yeah, so this is definitely one that I highly recommend for beginners, or even just if you want like a small deck for on the go. Trinity Tarot by Ari Weisner. Okay, we have a weird generic deck that I've never been able to find the name of a publisher or anything, but it's the Puppy Tarot, and as far as I could tell, it's not a bootleg copy. It was just one of those cheapies that I found on Amazon using up a gift card. Those are the backs, but it's super cute. It's a tiny bit taller than playing cards, but not much. And it's all these puppies. This was my first dog deck, and I love it. They're just really cute, and this is kind of one of those decks that if I just want a little bit of comfort, or like, I love the 7 of Cups. I just think it's funny. you get a little bit of comfort with your, and there's something that I think is kind of cute. It sort of looks vintage, you know, like you're looking at old vintage cards or something. I don't know, there's just something about it that I really like. And then of course the fact that it's puppies. So that's the puppy tarot. And it being just a little bit smaller, it's kind of one of those decks that I love to bring to bed. Sometimes just to look at the cards, or if I just need, you know, if there's something kind of bothering me, it's definitely a deck that I reach for. And I love that it's small, because it's then, even just something being a little bit smaller makes it easier if you want to do like a bigger spread, you know, and you're doing like a tray, or even, you know, using a book as your little reading area, particularly in bed. So that's the puppy tarot. Okay, last two decks are also bridge size, and these are both historical reproductions. This one is the 1870 Piedmontese, Tarot Piedmontese. This is published by Viewmont Press, and they do historical reproductions of decks. They also do some RWS reproductions, you know, like in different colors, some with keywords, and then they also do some modern decks as well. They're an independent publisher in the US, and I really love what they do. It was kind of fun to add, like, this was less than $20 on sale, and I think even at normal price it's still in that like $20 range. But it was kind of fun to add something a little bit different, and it's a full 78 card deck, but it's in that bridge size. And I love these older illustrations. It's just definitely different than anything else that I have, and it's kind of fun to read for someone who maybe wants something a little different, or isn't crazy about the imagery and sort of likes these, and this doesn't even look to me like even like a regular, like, it is definitely in the Tarot de Marseille, but it's definitely also its own thing. And so I was glad to be able to add this in, and the smaller size makes it easy for on the go or just for something a little different. I think there's also something to, you know, there's the obvious factor of size. It makes it easier if you want to do a bigger spread, or if you're adding in other cards, you know, if you're adding in Oracle, or you want to do a larger spread. But I think there's another factor to having a small deck in whatever size it is. And it's also something about playing with dimensions. I'm so used to seeing this kind of size of card, or mostly roughly this size. And so there's something when you do a spread, or at least for me, I have noticed that there's something about a smaller deck where it plays with dimensions, or even size or shape. Like this is small and square. And so there's something about playing with the dimensions that makes the reading a little bit different. And that's another aspect, I think, to a smaller deck that it can add in, that you maybe don't notice until you're, you know, reading with it. And I sometimes forget that unless I'm using one of these smaller decks. Last one, this is a majors only deck. It was put out by Artisan Tarot. Artisan Tarot is another independent publisher in the US, and they're known for their reproductions and restorations of classic Tarot de Marseille decks. This one, though, was offered, you can buy the majors only version, I think, of this, or you can get the full size, well, full 78. They have some of their decks that come in regular, you know, tarot size, and then some that come in this smaller size. But this one happened to be both smaller and it came as a, I got the majors only version. At the time they were doing a promotion where you could get the majors only deck, or the major arcana deck, as for free if you just paid for shipping. I don't think they're offering that any longer, but you can still buy a majors deck just like this. I think it's like 20, or you can get the full deck in the same size. But like I said, they have some other decks that are not just not in the bridge size. So that's all of the mini decks that I have. I'm just calling them mini. Anyway, what do you think? Do you have any of these? Do you reach for, do you like a deck in a tin or a small deck in a bag that you reach for? Do you take stuff on the go? I would love to hear. Tell me what you think of some of these smaller decks, and I hope to see you in another video. Take care.